Welcome back to this beginner's guide for Fire Emblem 6 on hard mode. It's time for chapter 5, which, despite being named after the most important object in the franchise, is not really that tough a chapter. But it has some new challenges you'll need to deal with. You are faced with a choice at the start of this chapter between taking the short route through the gate or the long route through the forests. The enemies of this map consist mostly of fighters, but there are some really nasty mercenaries here and there. You faced these guys before in chapter 2, but these guys are much more dangerous, being able to double most of your units, and even your Rutger can't double them back. They also have a lot of skill, which means you often have to face low percentage criticals when going up against them. It doesn't happen often, but when it does, it's usually a reset. This chapter also features a lot of nomads, and there's a lot of forest tiles for them to take cover in, which can make them quite obnoxious to deal with. The village to the north gives you a Gaunt's Lance, an incredibly useful item that I'll talk more about later. There's a shop next to the village that sells the same fire tomes, heal staves, and vulneraries from last chapter. But in addition to that, this shop also sells door keys, which can be quite useful, so make sure you stop by here at some point. From turn 12 to 18, 2 brigands will spawn from the forts on the left-hand side of the map. Additionally, from turn 15 to 18, 2 more brigands will spawn on the forts on the right side of the map. That's a total of 22 brigands, by the way, which is a lot. Some players consider this a hassle, others see it as free experience. Which one you are depends on your playstyle. As I briefly mentioned before, the main gimmick of this chapter is that you are presented with 2 routes to reach the castle. You can either go the fast route through the gate, which opens up when you put a unit right next to it, or you can take the long way around to the north, fighting your way through the forests. If you played on normal mode, you might think going through the gate is the best route, but on hard mode, opening it up will cause the boss to spawn a pair of mercenaries and nomads, which adds 4 additional enemies to the already huge group of enemy units around the castle. Trying to break through the gate on hard mode is a fun challenge for veterans, but for beginners, my advice is to take the long route. There's simply too many enemies around the gate to safely handle. Starting off, the first thing you want to focus on is securing the northern forts before the enemies can get there. I like to rescue drop Rutger on top of one, so he starts off in range of the first fighter, and then use my other mounted units to get Lu and Deke closer as well. The southern mountain tile is a great spot for Lu to chip the fighters, but be careful, he might get one shot by their hand axes. As the enemies storm you, you want to focus on killing as many of them as possible before the 2 first nomads can arrive to complicate things. Don't be afraid to use Rutger's killing edge to remove a bulky fighter, or even to go up against one of the mercenaries. If you manage to crit one of them, that saves you a lot of hassle, as these normally require multiple units to kill. If you're in a situation where you can bait one of the nomads with Marcus, you should be in a good position to kill them on the upcoming player phase. Just for the love of God, try to make sure they don't get to shoot you from a forest tile. If an enemy nomad ends up on a forest, they become incredibly hard to kill. Just look at their ranges and check what tiles they can and cannot attack from before you bait them, and make sure they are always forced to place themselves out in the open. If you somehow fail to kill them, remember that you can always surround them with your scrubs. At this point during the map, things are going to start to feel very crowded. Due to the sheer amount of units having to pass through a rather narrow field with lots of forest tiles impeding movement, you might find that your units are a hindrance to each other. So make liberal use of the rescue mechanic. Attack with a unit, then pick it up and drop it off so another unit can move in and attack as well. Your fighters are actually quite useful in this chapter, as they have enough con to pick and drop off most of your other characters. Make sure you visit the northern village on your way to get the Gaunt's Lance. This is a fantastic item. It only has 1 less might compared to the Steel Lance, but 10% more hit and 3 less weights. The Gaunt's Lance weight of 10 is usually around the sweet spot for most of your cavaliers and paladins. It's a fantastic lance, so make sure you put it to good use. You should also stop by the shop to pick up a handful of door keys. I recommend you just buy 5 or 6 of them right away, so you won't ever have to worry about them later on. The chapter after this will feature a lot of doors, and your thief can only be in one place at a time, so having a few door keys will make things a lot less tedious for you. Make your way through the rest of the forest and pull enemies with Marcus. He can handle the mercenaries relatively well with his Iron Lance, as long as they don't get the cover of the forests. Follow it up with your stronger fighters and take them down one by one. Depending on your speed, when you get close to the castle is probably when you will start to encounter Brigand Reinforcements, and they are of course ambush spawns. While these brigands can be a nice source of experience, I usually don't want to bother with them. At this point you got so many scrubs tagging along with the rest of your army, and all it takes is a single stray hand axe for you to have to reset, so just place one of your units on top of the forts to block their spawns. As you make your way down towards the castle, things might get a little cramped as you deal with the final enemies, but lead the way with a strong unit such as Marcus, Rutger or Deke, and heal them up as needed. Use one of your many mounted units to rescue your healers out of harm's way. The brigands can be a bit annoying if they're allowed to run up into the peaks where they can harass you with their hand axes, but Rutger should still be accurate enough to hit them. Be careful as you move down though. The boss has a hand axe, and you really don't want to get hit by that. Before you start taking on the boss of the chapter, make sure you block the southern fort, or you might have to deal with a nasty surprise coming your way. Luckily, as always though, I am never punished. At this point, you might start to see brigands spawning from the right side forts. These guys are a nice source of experience, and not everyone is needed down south to fight the boss, so you could send someone over there to deal with them. This may sound a little strange, but I actually prefer having Marcus clean up these guys with an iron sword. Now you might be thinking, Marcus, really? But here's my reasoning. Very soon you will be facing the hardest map in the game, Chapter 7. And on this map, your Marcus will have to do a lot of heavy lifting. Just an extra point of speed or defense can make a huge difference in that chapter, as Marcus will be facing waves of tough enemies. This is just something I like to do and you don't have to replicate it, but I tend to find that it makes Chapter 7 a little bit more bearable if you have a couple of levels on Marcus. Anyway, while Marcus is busy fighting the brigands, the rest of us have to take on the boss, Dory. Now, why the developers thought it was acceptable to put a killer axe on a brigand in Chapter 5 is beyond me. But one thing is for sure, you do not want to go up against this thing. So what you want to do is to bait Dory into equipping his hand axe, and then attack him only on player phase, using your mounts to rescue the unit out of harm's way. You can use Rutger's Killing Edge if you are impatient, but his iron sword will get the job done just as well. It will just take a little longer. Rinse and repeat until Dory falls. This is by far the safest way to deal with him. On a side note, if you want to squeeze every last drop of experience out of this map, you can fly over the wall and open the gate with Shanna to spawn the nomads and mercenaries, but this won't work after you kill Dory, so beware of that. I usually don't bother with this, but hey, the option is there if you didn't think the 22 Brigand Reinforcements was enough. Anyway, with Dory dead, you can now seize the gate, and congratulations, you just beat Fire Emblem. The chapter Fire Emblem, that is. You still have quite a ways to go before you actually beat this game. Up next, we finally get access to battle preps, which will make things a lot easier. But the upcoming map can also be quite a headache if you don't know what's ahead, but that's why you're watching this guide. If you found this episode helpful, give it a like and a comment. As always, my name is Mengs, and I will see you again soon. Bye bye!